movement and kind of raising the hand after.
Please be very German.
Good. Okay.
Thank you very much. This is the best introduction I could hope for, and thank you to Günther and all your other organizers for having me here. I am thrilled to have the opportunity to present to you a couple of thoughts. And yes, you have basically heard everything you need to know. Read Husserl. That's good to know. Actually, there won't be much Husserl. There won't be Husserl at all in my presentation because my thoughts and my ideas are actually taken from a later phenomenologist, Maurice Merleau-Ponty. I won't go into that in this presentation, but just try to present to you a couple of ideas that I think could be interesting for the question, what is attention? And mostly for the question, how is it that we make attentional experiences or attentive experiences? And then we will find a way, probably in the discussion, for merging these kind of considerations with the question of attention economy. So I'll start right away with the aim of my presentation today. I will try to spell out a rich concept of attention. By rich, I mean a concept of attention that is able to represent different attentional experiences and that avoids certain kinds of reductionism of the form. For example, attention is nothing else than a brain mechanism, an adverb, a filter, or what you have in different theories. In order to arrive at this richer concepts, in the first part, I will criticize a common view of understanding attention, the spotlight metaphor, which was already mentioned in a previous talk. I will try to show, obviously, in a very superficial and quick way, for reasons of time, that this metaphor is crucial to much of today's research on attention, but that it rests on problematic assumptions about the nature of attention itself. In the second part, I will try to sketch out a series of different attentional experiences that are far more complex and rich than this metaphor would allow for. For every form, I will focus particularly on its corporeal conditions and on the way in which this particular form of attention creates or constitutes the objects in our experience. In the third part, I conclude by proposing to conceptualize attention as creative and embodied. So the first part about spotlight metaphor, I think that in our everyday experience, we really tend to imagine attention as a kind of beam of light. This ray of light emanates from a kind of mind's eye, and we willfully or less willfully direct it towards individual things. By illuminating surrounding things, they appear more clearly, more distinctly than if they remain unnoticed. The ray of light aims at recognition of things. That which is illuminated is recognized, while everything that only appears on the periphery remains somehow in the dark. This conception of attention is not limited to our more or less explicit everyday psychology. Several psychological theories of attention assume that attention, like a filter, makes a selection of incoming stimuli. Until today, little seems to have changed in this standard's conception. When the most widely read popular psychology magazine writes the following in 2022, attention is a spotlight that focuses your awareness on a subset of what's going on in your head or in your environment. Some people naturally have more control over the spotlight than others. Control over the spotlight can also vary in certain situations, for example, when one is free of distractions and with the aid of certain drugs like caffeine, Ritalin, and other stimulants. I think a similar conception can be reconstructed in parts of the history of philosophy, from Augustine to Malebranche, to Kant's anthropology, to Lotze and Bolzano, and so on. So I think it is a widespread conception. I think it is worthwhile to first examine the spotlight conception of attention on the basis of a very easy phenomenological analysis. Think of the experience we have of reading a book. According to the spotlight metaphor, our experience of attentive reading is the experience of our mind's eye focusing on the text. The only condition for this to succeed is that no other stimulation prevents or distracts us from focusing on the text. But what exactly is illuminating in this experience of attentively reading a text? The word on the page, the sentence, the whole period, the page, what happens in the imaginary realm created by the novel itself. I think that the spotlight metaphor has one crucial flaw that I would like to focus on. The experience of reading is actually rarely successful just and only because we are willingly and intellectually devoted to what happens in the book and nothing disturbs us. Often we are just tired, we don't feel like it, or we are not in the right mood to look forward to reading the book. And sometimes the book is simply uninteresting. When this is the case, we all have a similar experience. Our body is somehow out of place. We can't find the right body position. We become restless. And take, for example, Anna Karenina doesn't really seem to want to materialize before our mind's eye. Our attention eludes us, and we are not able to create a meaningful object for this attention. I think that the spotlight metaphor is not able to account for the experience we have when our attention eludes us, when it doesn't work. We therefore need a theory that can describe the withdrawal of attention as well as its bodily and creative components. And so I will come to the second part of my presentation. I start again with a very concrete experience, but a different one than reading Anna Karenina. Let's say we take a walk in the forest. We take in the impressions, so to speak. We are absorbed in the landscape. Certain noises or a too intense conversation can interfere with enjoying the landscape. What happens to our attention in this situation? This is the first form of attention I would like to describe. And I would like to describe this as open attention. In this case, walking through the fields, we are not focused on a single object or on a single activity. We are basically receptive to every impulse from the environment. Open attention interferes only very minimal with talking. A relaxed chat about landscape can even be conducive to enjoyment. And sometimes it is certainly possible to be absorbed in the experience of the landscape while talking about something else. A loud argument, however, prevents any possibility of enjoying the landscape. I think we can represent the phenomenological structure of this kind of attention in the way that is represented on the slide. It is an open horizontal field of experience. What we are attentive to is not a single object, but rather the whole scene, the whole situation in which we are embedded. Being attentive in an open mode makes it possible, it creates, it constitutes the experience of a whole scene in which objects can be parts. The field structure can be thought of as an horizon. In the mode of open attention, our experience is shaped bodily in a very peculiar way. In the state of open attention, corporeality is necessary at play, insofar as immersion in the scene is possible only because the body is capable of moving around in a certain way that it is appropriate to enjoying the scene. The setting of the scene happens from the point of orientation of one's own body, which precisely for this reason must be able to literally disappear into the background of my experience. I'm not thinking about my body. I'm not thinking about what I'm doing. I'm just enjoying the landscape. The subject thus experiences its own body primarily as mobile, as something that can move around, even if only in the very minimal way of moving one's eyes. Now, what happens when I am so absorbed in the landscape and after a moment of silence, a bird calls out? I turn around and I am at first distracted in the strict sense of the word. Quite passively, I turn my attention to the sound in an attempt to identify it, to understand where it's coming from. This process is what I would like to call, with a word created by Bernard Waldenfels, pathic, is a kind of affective attention. And in this form of attention, it is not up to me, it's not my active decision to turn around. This is something that, if you want, happens to me. I cannot always avoid being distracted in this kind of situations. Except through a more or less intense effort of the will, I cannot resist the temptation to look there and hear what is happening. The diversion of attention happens to us. This form of attention usually has a very short duration in time, because at the very moment I turn around and catch sight of, in this case, a little egret, I can consciously decide if I want to concentrate on the bird and enjoy its beauty, or if I would rather turn around and do something else. Unlike in the case of open attention, in the moment of passive distraction, it is not possible to converse. In general, we are not really open to what might still come. We are focused in a way. It is not openness to the environment that characterizes this form of attention, but rather a certain kind of experienced attention. Passive attention creates attention that must be redeemed by my turning towards the thing that attracts attention. This form of attention makes it possible that we experience things as something surprising. It creates a field of emotionality and affectivity. Corporeality is experienced in this attentional form as responsivity. My body is precisely that which turns around, which moves, which goes in the direction of the source of attraction, and so on. The body is therefore such that it responds to the objects and leaves out the tension that this object creates. The next form is searching attention. What happens to our attention when we search for something? After hearing the call of a bird, I scan the landscape. I have only maybe a rough idea of where the bird might be or what bird it might be. And so I have to scan the whole area looking for the features of a certain bird. Searching attention displays both basic phenomenological traits we have encountered so far: tension from passive attention and openness from open attention. Indeed, the action of searching tends towards finding the object. So this is this tension of finding it, finding the object it is looking for, and displays therefore tension. But we can actually find something only if we are receptive to things in the surrounding world. There is, in the case of searching attention, no real focus on a particular real object. Indeed, objects we see are created, are constituted as traces and indications for the object we are actually looking for, at least in the very basic mode of, no, that is not it. Here we have a combination of the two corporeality conditions we have encountered so far. Responsivity is also fundamentally implied in searching attention, as the subject must respond and react accurately to the environment in order to distinguish what is looked for from what is irrelevant. I am searching, and minimally at least, by moving my eyes, pricking my ears, which is of course a metaphor, but indicates a certain bodily adaptive movement, and so on and so on. The minimal bodily response in searching is precisely this: no, that's not it, which leads to further exploratory movements. The last form of attention I would like to describe is what I call working attention. Let's say that a robin flies onto the branch where it has been gathering berries. For some time, you can actually see the berries in the low part of the picture. I notice that the robin is finally sitting down. I take out my spotting scope, adjust the focus, and finally immerse myself in observing its beautiful plumage. The aesthetic enjoyment of the colors, as well as the curiosity for the behavior of the bird, demands all my power of concentration, these powers are completely absorbed in the activity of observing. Here we are dealing with what I would like to call working attention. In the case of working attention, the subject finds what is being looking for. In attentive observation, we are able to distinguish, describe, and enjoy different features of the robin. But we are very focused here, so focused, in fact, that we seem to forget everything else surrounding us. In this situation, I don't hear that my partner has been complaining loudly for several minutes because he's hungry. the thing I am attentive at creates the center of my experience. The role of the body in this type of attention is very clear. We can only concentrate appropriately when the body is solid. That is, when we are not hungry, not ill, not in pain, and etc., etc. And the body itself can therefore disappear and into the background of our experience. Working attention is therefore experienced bodily in 3 different modes. The body must be solid. Mobility is, of course, also a necessary part of it. And working attention is characterized precisely by the fact that responsiveness to the thing that has been noticed is high. I will come to my conclusion. A phenomenology of creative and embodied attention is, I think, able to describe different forms of attention by stressing the richness of their experiential characteristics. These phenomenological descriptions show that every form of attention is essentially connected with experiencing one's own corporeality differently and providing the world with a certain structure and with certain constituted things. This is the moment of creativity. Paying attention is precisely not like a cone of light or a beam of light that I project onto the world or the landscape, but is a total bodily practice that creates things and changes my world in such a way that this world becomes much richer. Thank you very much for your attention and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks a lot. Please open for questions and comments.
Oh, thanks for the presentation. So I think that the spotlight metaphor, one of the other kind of, I think, limitations of it is its visual bias, essentially. I'm curious how you see these 5 forms of attention that you outlined, I guess, in different sensory modalities, because it seems like this one experience could, tactile attention could possibly be, like, as you call it, like kind of like searching attention, your hand moves over the thing, then maybe that's also creates the field of experience, touch something. How do you see that as, multimodality?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. Maybe I should have said that this is actually really a brief outline of my main project. And in my main project, I actually have some remarks on the relationship between the forms and the different sensory organs. I would say that every of the forms that I was trying to spell out applies to all different sense modalities. But for every form, we always have one sense modality which seems to take up a kind of exemplary role. As you said, I think you are on the right track. For searching attention, we would probably recur to expressions and descriptions that are taken from the field of testing experiences. Scanning the landscape, it means actually touching different things and discarding them if they are not what you're looking for. I think that working attention is best thought of in terms of visual metaphors and visual experiences. But then again, for other forms, I'm not so sure, because for open attention, for example, I think that the best examples come actually from the olfactory field, because olfactory has this basic openness to whatever is going on. I mean, you can obviously close your nose, but you're basically defenseless when intruding odors trying to reach you. And what happens in those cases is that you first try to understand what is this peculiar smell that is reaching me. So I think they are applicable to all 5 different sensory modalities, but always with one exemplary sense modality for each form.
Yeah, thanks. We have first a question by Lucas, and then
I find this distinction very interesting, and I was wondering whether you can use it to make sense of our experience in the digital realm or using computers to criticize the way that our attention is gained or used, absorbed. So it seems to me, for example, that the pathic version of attention, that's something that maps very closely to me getting an email and me stopping to read. And I'm losing my attention, very focused on this email. So maybe there is a way of spelling out what's wrong with our current way of being attentive in this realm, and maybe also propose how a more natural allocation of modes of attention would we look like? I'm curious to hear what
Yes, thank you very much. This is actually something I'm working on right now. I think that's basically in using digital technologies, you always have two forms of attention that are crucial to what you're doing. The first one is, as you said, pathic attention or passive attention, because you are constantly attracted by, advertising and clickbaits and what, or even just getting an email. So that's the first form. The second form is something that I haven't discussed here, but that actually plays a crucial role. It's what I call waiting attention. This is something that you have every time that you scroll for notifications or for news on something. You seems to be waiting to find something really interesting, and you can go on and on just waiting for that notification that really grabs your attention. The point is, what happens when you find that particular piece of news that interests you, or when you see, I got an email that could be interesting, let me open it up, you switch to another mode of attention, which is working attention. Then you are focused, you are reading something, you are thinking about how should I reply to the email or whatever. So I think you can actually describe pretty well these experiences as changes between these modes of attention. If this also helps in finding more appropriate ways of paying attention to digital technologies, this is something I still don't know. I hope, of course, to be able to find some kind of solution, or at least some kind of plausible description of what is going on there. If it is possible, I think the most important idea will be really to try to describe this switch from waiting for the right interesting news to appear and reacting to it in the proper way. And then in this field of reacting in the proper way, I think that's where an ethic of attention should actually take place. Great question, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Daniel, thanks. I have two thoughts. First thing, in your categories of different types of attention, it reminded me of John Yates' book about the mindfulness. Because he also has many analogies. It's a meditation.
Okay.
Helps self-helping. So I just wanted to point that out. More specifically, I've been told in this meditation practice what you call open attention. I was like, that's what I've been told is called awareness.
Yes.
Is it different? Could you reflect on that?
Yeah, thanks. I will come back to you later for the reference. I don't know the book. As for the second question, I have worked on it. I have a paper that is coming out, or maybe it's already out, on attention and mindfulness, particularly on open attention and mindfulness. Since I'm not an expert on meditation, what I try to do in the article is just to spell out what I think are some basic differences. I would say that open attention, in the way in which I understand it, is not the same as awareness, because when I am enjoying the landscape, this is my basic example, I'm not just aware of what's going on around me. I am also concentrated in a certain way upon a part of what is surrounding me, the landscape. For example, I can try not to focus on the on the street, on the loud street on the right of my experiential field. I think there is a kind of narrowness to this form of open attention that is not there in awareness as in awareness to my surroundings. I would say that's probably the difference.